Helms had picked something up, and he went after me, and for quite a long time went after me because I didn't answer him that, yes, they're about to normalize relations, because I didn't know the answer. It's that confrontation between the Congress and the White House where the Congress felt it had not been properly informed, even though leadership of Congress had been informed in the normal fashion. Broad membership in the Senate and House were not kept abreast of where the U.S. and China were at that initial point and at a number of points after that. So you try to figure, is there a way we can address this question? Is there a way to bring more people into the process so that once a decision is made, it has some sustainability? I think in the early days that was really not possible. China was itself governed in a very secretive fashion. I think with time that's changed, and more can be done through reliance on our broader institutions of the government and through a more public debate of where our policy is and ought to be going without having to resort to kind of a close group of people who keep secrets from the broader bureaucracy. That's sort of an opening point.
Ken?
I'd make several comments focusing internally on the administration rather than between the administration and the Hill. I do think our relationship with China is uniquely broad and complex. There is not a cabinet agency that does not deal with its counterpart in China, I think probably weekly or more at this point in time. I therefore think it's very important for the White House to play a key role here. You need to get a kind of conceptual framework around this that needs to be driven, by the people who have the overall relationship in mind and can balance the politics of it and balance the diplomacy of it. So I believe in a fairly strong White House role. It also is very helpful in the instance that Jeff just referred to, where he actually did make news by revealing the feudal structure of the State Department. So I want to thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. But the reality is just what Jeff said, which is so you get very smart people who have worked on issues for a very long period of time, and there's tremendous expertise to draw off of there. But in many cases, you're dealing with people who have a part of the puzzle, and frankly, they've been arguing a particular position for a very long period of time. They have a hard time getting beyond that to make the compromises and integrate things in the way that must be done to get good policy. So I think the White House has a really critical role to play, but then having moved this forward, obviously has to have the politics of it right, because this is now a relationship that affects every American in one way or another, and so you can't any longer manage it in the way that a Nixon or Carter managed it. Those days are long gone and no longer feasible.
I didn't expect to get any questions from the audience, but I have virtually a book here. I will try to work through some of these, and if there are some with a common theme, I will group them together. But here's one that we could start out with, just to get the ideas flowing. What will the U.S. government and people do if we find a Chinese ship not far from the California coast in international waters?
Welcome it to our shores. This is a very important issue. There is a long-standing American tradition of freedom of navigation according to international law. Now, different countries have somewhat differing definitions around the margins here. But it isn't that there is no history to draw on. And when in the days of the Soviet Union, at the height of the Cold War, we negotiated rules of the road with the Soviets. So their Navy operated closer to our shores than we would have preferred, and we did the same near naval ports that the Soviets had. But we both recognized that there are international rules, and we had better conduct ourselves in a way that doesn't lead to anyone getting killed or having an accident that suddenly creates a crisis that dominates the relationship. So I think it's very important for for the Chinese and the American militaries to get that kind of mutual understanding at this point. And I was not joking when I said if the Chinese want to operate in our exclusive economic zone, I don't think they're going to run into a problem on that.
Yes, Jeff.
Yeah, I agree with everything that Ken said. When the Law of the Sea Convention was negotiated, it was an elaborate compromise among major naval powers, coastal states, and landlocked states. And the agreement was that the exclusive economic zones would go out to 200 miles. But the littoral states would not have security rights within those exclusive economic zones, that military ships could operate without the need for consent from the littoral states and could operate within those zones. And that is our view. That is the view of most of the signatories of the Law of the Sea Convention. That is a view that is supported by traditional, customary international law. And I think that is the framework in which you should see the episode that happened in the South China Sea.
And can I just add, because I think it's lost in this, Chinese trawlers or fishing vessels with a lot of antennas aboard indeed do operate close to interesting installations in the United States. And I am unaware of any time when the United States Navy has interfered with those operations.
Let me just add in that connection, I spent much of my career working on Soviet affairs. And during the period when I was the Deputy Assistant Secretary handling Chinese affairs at the State Department, I also had responsibility for our relations with the South Pacific Islands, the islands in the Pacific. When I visited Kwajalein, where we had all of our $6 billion of equipment because we would test our missiles and fire them there, there was always a Soviet fishing trawler loaded with electronic equipment, meaning it was a spy collecting ship, within sight of shore. So it was really in close-in waters, and they were not harassed one iota. So, I mean, this is just to reinforce the point. This is not simply a question of we do it to China. What would we do if they do it to us? The fact is that for decades, we have had intelligence collecting operations close to our shores in international waters, and there has been no harassment of them, to the best of my knowledge. Here's an interesting question. 你们所谓中国专家能讲中文吗？What? At least two of them nodded affirmatively.
In confidence that you would then switch to English.
We're dealing with U.S. policy toward China from the viewpoint of the White House. Here's an interesting question, which Jeff probably is aimed at you, but I think the other experts up here could comment as well. Is the United States concerned by China and Taiwan moving too close together?
Happy to answer. The Obama administration approach on this is consistent with the approach of U.S. administration since the days of Doug Paal in the White House. It was George Shultz, right? The George Shultz statement. George Shultz in 1987 said that the U.S. welcomes development of cross-strait economic, commercial, can't remember the full statement, and other ties interactions between Taiwan and the mainland. That was a switch in U.S. policy occasioned by the switch in policy by Jiang Jingguo in Taiwan, who was opening up to the mainland, and the U.S. was supportive of that direction. And that has been the policy of U.S. administration since. Since Ma Ying-jeou came into office in Taiwan, that process of reconciliation and rapprochement has accelerated after 8 years of moving in the opposite direction through no fault of Dennis Wilder. In fact, Dennis fought against that. But we welcome reduction in tensions between the two sides. As you know, under the Taiwan Relations Act, we have certain obligations for Taiwan's security and Taiwan's defense. We do not welcome tensions between Taiwan and the PRC. That is not in U.S. interest. So if Taiwan and PRC can reach agreements that reduce tensions, I can think of no good reason why the U.S. government should be flashing red or yellow lights. Now, Ma Ying-jeou has made clear that Taiwan and the PRC are not moving towards